What's up, guys? How we doing? All right, 3 people over there doing good. Awesome. I love it. Well, hey, good morning. My name is Justin. I'm one of the pastors here at Hope City. So glad that you guys are here. And I want to welcome you if you're a guest with us today. I know you guys could be a lot of different places, and we're just pumped that you guys are here. Funny thing happened right after first service. I was talking to someone, and apparently they hadn't been in church in 2 weeks, and so they confessed it to me. And I said, "Hey, man, so good to see you. I'm sorry I haven't been here for a while." And I'm like, "I haven't been here for the last 2 weeks, so I had no idea that they weren't here." And so they just kind of called themselves out, right in front of me. I'm like, "Well, I haven't been here for the last 2 weeks either, so I didn't know that about you." This is a guilt-free zone, all right? So if this is your first time here, if you haven't been here in a while but you're back, we're just welcome you. We know that summer is busy, and we all have a lot of different things going on, and so this is a guilt-free place. You don't have to feel guilty about missing. We want you here. We want to welcome you here, but at the same time, you don't have to get kicked in the teeth if you can't come to church, all right? But one of the things we say here all the time is Hope City is a place where you can belong before you believe. And we know that a lot of us come from different places spiritually. A lot of us are on different tracks spiritually. And one of the things I love about church, especially this culture here that we've created over the last 10 months at Hope City, is God meets us right where we're at. And so you don't have to have it all together. You don't have to be perfect. In fact, the more not together you are, the more powerfully I think God meets you. And I think God's grace is most powerful when we come to him honestly and not pretend to be something that we're not. And so I'm just grateful that you guys are here. If you have a Bible, turn to Joshua chapter 1. We're going to get there in a second. If you don't, as Daniel said, we have the Hope City app. All the message notes that we're going to talk about today are on that app. You can follow along with the message as we go through it. All the scripture is going to be there and on the screen behind me. So we're going to get to Joshua chapter 1 here in just a second. But over the course of the summer, we've been in this series called Greater. And the idea of this series is that we think in our minds that it's our intentions that determine the course of our life. If we have good enough intentions, then our life is going to be good, right? If we have good intentions in our marriage, we're going to have a good marriage. If we have good intentions in our classes, then we're just going to get good grades. If we have good intentions in our relationships, our dating relationships, we're going to have a good, healthy dating relationships. If we have good intentions in our family, we're going to have healthy families. But it's not our intentions that accomplish anything. It's our choices. See, the choices that you make determine the direction of your life. And our choices aren't born out of the knowledge that we have about God, because you can have a ton of knowledge about God and not really be in a relationship with God. The choices that you and I make every single day, you know where they're born from? They're born from our values. And so if we can change what we value, if we can tweak what we value, if we can allow God to transform what we value, our choices are going to be greater. Our choices are going to be better, and we'll have the more of the life that God has called us to have. And so we've been talking about this idea of making better choices because we're allowing God to transform our heart. And so that's kind of where we've been over the last few weeks. And so every week of the series that I've been teaching, I've been giving you guys these poll questions. We vote on what we think is greater, okay? And I'm learning a lot about you guys. In fact, I was really surprised first service on a couple of these. So I'm going to pose the first one to you. What do you believe is greater? Star Wars or Star Trek? Who are my Star Wars people? Anybody? Okay. Do we have any Star Trek people in here? One person. All right. That was the ratio first service, all right? And some of you don't even like either one of those, and that's totally cool. Who doesn't like either one of those movies? Wow, a lot more people than I thought. That's amazing. All right, don't talk to my wife because she loves Star Wars. Okay, I would say Star Wars is greater. That didn't come up there, but I would say so. Okay, who are my soccer people? Who would say soccer is better than football? Soccer is greater than football. Way more people than I ever anticipated, okay? Who would say football is greater? Okay, that's more like I thought. I would say football. I've never really watched a full soccer game, to be fair. My kids played soccer, and I tolerated, got through it, but I think you just have to see it in person. I have never been in person. I don't like hockey for that reason, too. So, so football greater than soccer. That's what I'm going to say. Pacers, Colts, let's just go equals, all right? They're just equal, that equal sign, all right? Because they're just equally bad right now, okay? I'm just equally frustrated with both franchises. Hopefully, Andrew Luck will start throwing sometime before the beginning of the season. That's all I'm saying. And the Pacers, I can't even go there. Oh, man. Yeah, so anyway, let's just move on from that. So today we're going to talk about this idea that adversity is greater than comfort. Now, just saying that out loud, some of you are like, really? I don't like adversity. I like being comfortable. And I would say to you, me too. But if we're going to live the life that God has called us to live, if we're going to live the life that God has created us to live, then there's this aspect of adversity, there's this aspect of heartache, there's this dimension of disappointment and trials that we're called to embrace, not because God is punishing us, but because God is preparing us. And so rather than just dive into the content of the message without really setting it up, I invited a couple of friends to join me. I just want to have them share part of their story with you. So I'm going to ask Haley and Mike to come up. Haley and Mike Morgan are here. And can you guys welcome them to Hope City? First service, and you have a mic for you. I mean, we're way more prepared second service. All right, so this is Haley and Mike. I'm just going to let you guys kind of introduce yourself, and we're going to kind of talk about just some things that they've experienced in life and some adversity that they're currently experiencing, and that's going to kind of lead us into the message that we're going to share today. So,
well, I appreciate you having us.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks so much, and I'm glad that we can have a rose between two ugly guys. So
yeah, exactly.
It works well.
I don't know. Well, I don't know about that. But I mean, yeah. Before you jump in there, we met on Thursday. My wife has been more connected to Haley through women's events and social media than I have been, and so I got to meet them face to face on Thursday. And it was like the meeting that never ended in a good way. Like we just kept talking and I texted my wife. I'm like, it's two hours. I'm just not leaving. And so I'm just grateful for you guys being willing to open up to us and be here to share with our community today just what God is doing in your life. So.
Well, I appreciate it. Thanks. And so kind of a little bit about us and where we come from. And our story is not really a story of like tragedy. Nobody has died. There's nobody terminally ill. It's really kind of a choice thing of where we found ourselves. And so everybody likes a good quitting story. So that's a little bit of what our story is kind of how we quit. I started off, always knowing I wanted to do business. I wanted to do big business. I wanted to be an executive leader and kind of climb this corporate ladder thing. I was the kid. I was 21 when I got my 401k, which is so dorky now.
You're happy about that now?
Yeah, right.
I'm happy about that now.
Right. So, I was that kind of guy. Type A, controlling, was really all about maneuvering my career. And so I got out of school and went and worked for a large Fortune 500 company and went through a rotational program with them and bounced around and did marketing and sales and was on that track. I'll let you kind of explain maybe your background a bit.
Yeah, I always say like he was being wined and dined with all these fancy trips, and I was cutting up little pieces of hot dogs for our first two kids.
But you're not bitter about that at all.
No, actually, I really loved that season of life. It actually was a great season of life, but I found myself a little bit like pulled in other directions or a little tiny bit bored. And so I would I'm just really entrepreneurial. So every hobby I had became a business, and the businesses did well. And then I found myself with like 5 businesses. And I started blogging when Christian women blogging was like blowing up kind of at like right that perfect time. And so I kind of like hopped on that wave and kind of rode it. And
I mean, in all honesty, you kind of like became Christian famous, like you, tiny twig.
In an uncomfortable way.
Yeah,
I mean,
like it went well. Like people knew you were invited to speak at places. You had thousands of people following you on social media and your blog, and like you're being very humble right now. But you killed it.
It was great. I mean, and it is still great. But we found ourselves like everything was going our way. We had beautiful kids. You had a great job. I had this great job hobby, and I was gaining a lot of influence within like Christian women's ministry and things like that. So
so like we kind of are on this trajectory where things were running really, really smoothly, and so Haley's kind of got this side thing that turns into she's doing like ebooks and they're selling crazy, and then hundreds of thousands of people are following her every month online, and then I'm doing business and wanting to I always kind of explain the way a career in the corporate world works is where you perform really well so that you can impress your boss, so you get the interview for the next job, so that you can perform really well, impress the boss, and get the interview for the next job, and so you kind of repeat the cycle as fast and as long as you can go, so we're kind of doing this thing, and it gets to a point where I don't know why, but I'm miserable. Just miserable doing it.
Mike, how long had you guys been married at that point?
Ooh, what do you think?
Probably
5, 6 years?
Okay.
7 years?
Longer than that, I think.
8 years? I'm bad at time.
He's really bad at time. It's somewhere like 8, 9 years.
But you have a couple kids.
Yeah.
At this point.
We've got a couple kids. Yeah, we've definitely got the picket fence thing going, where it was like 2 kids and a pet, and
it's all going the way it's supposed to go.
Right.
Yes.
Right. Everything in my plan, right, and because I'm the guy who has the 5-year plan, it was all running very according to exactly the way we want this thing to play out. in life. And so why was it, as this thing is unrolling in this plan, do I feel I was doing better at work than I'd ever done before, and it was like drudgery to get up, and anxiety, and it was a battle. It was a battle, and she knows that battle, and so we really kind of got to this point where she's got this women's conference, and she invites people to come to it, and she has all these speakers come, and 500 women show up from all over the country, and she's got this guy, because you always have to have, like, any Christian women's conference you go to has to have, like, a token dude. Like, it's just to make sure that it's, like, well represented. I don't know why.
We're just being nice to you. We're trying to be inclusive.
Right. So, and I'm there, of course, like, setting up chairs and being the cheerleader guy for the weekend. And so I'm sitting in the back of this auditorium, and this guy gets up, and he's this executive. Do you want to tell the story a little bit better?
Yeah, I will. First, it was the first conference that we had. So Mike, to this point, thought, that's a fun hobby you have, babe. Like, you are doing this conference. This is so fun. And then you came, and there were actually, like, hundreds of people, and you were like, oh.
Yeah, this is bigger than scrapbooking. Like,
yeah,
that was what I thought it was,
Yeah. And so he sits in on the one guy's talk, and I'm out there running around like a chicken with my head cut off, trying to keep everything going how it should. And he comes out afterwards with, like, tears in his eyes, and I'm thinking, like, oh no, something terrible has happened. He pulls me aside to a banquet room kind of like this, and people think we're in a big fight, because who cloisters off into
And I'm the guy who, at a women's conference, is the guy in the back of the room bawling my eyes out, like something.
Too much estrogen in the room.
Yeah, like a pipe had burst in my eyes or something, and
Yes.
and they're like looking around, like, what is this guy being the emotional one in the room for?
So this guy that we had come talk, he was a former Eli Lilly executive, and he was one of those guys who always had a number that he wanted to make in his head, like, I will have arrived when I make X amount of dollars. And that was his career trajectory, and I would say you resonated with that. Like, it was kind of like he was reading your mail.
For sure.
And he actually had left that job, but he left it because he went to adopt a daughter in Ethiopia, and they got to Ethiopia, he and his wife, and the daughter was not at the orphanage that she was supposed to be at. And so they went on this, like, epic biblical proportion search of Ethiopia to find this little girl, and they finally found her after 3 months. He had to take a leave of his job, like, it was crazy. And so he came back to Lily and basically said, like, this is great, but I've seen the world now. I see what need actually looks like. And so he quit that job to start a nonprofit, and basically he chose the being uncomfortable instead of this, like, lush, luxurious life that he was going to have.
And so in that moment, it was like a Holy Spirit kind of moment for me, where I saw, I don't know what I want to do in life all of the sudden, and I just know that this isn't it. And so it was this really difficult, it felt like a choice in that moment. Do I keep going with where I'm going with whatever plan I had laid out, or do I choose something else that I don't know what it looks like? And so it was this thing, and it took months of me getting the guts to get into my boss's office and tell him, like, I'm leaving. I'm going to try and start another company, and I wanted to have a mission behind it, to have something greater than myself, but I don't know how this is going to work, and I wish I could tell you. And he said, good luck to you.
And if we're being honest, like, when you guys decided to do that, Haley, I think you guys had this vision of, this is going to go really well. This is going to be super easy. We have online influence. We've paid the price. We have.
Yeah, there was no reason to think it wouldn't.
Right.
I mean, we had been like the golden couple since we were in high school. Like, we did everything the right way. We just everything. We seriously dated, then got married.
Yeah, we were like the youth group gold sticker kids.
Yes,
And
their youth group was very
God
successful
loved you guys
because
more.
Absolutely,
right,
sure.
Yeah, exactly. I don't know. But we thought, like, of course, everything we've done to this point has gone really well, so why wouldn't this? And it was, and it seems like God is leading you in a direction. Like, why would God lead you somewhere?
And when he calls you somewhere, he would never call us to something that wouldn't work out, right?
Yeah.
God's not going to call me out of a successful job to an unsuccessful job.
Right.
That makes no sense. That surely couldn't be biblical, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, so you do this Kickstarter. That goes extremely
Yeah.
well. You get investors. You start this apparel company.
Yep. And so the apparel company is going really well. And so, it had this mission behind it to really serve families. And that was really the heartbeat for us, is, kind of rallying millennials around a cause to be able to help families. So it was really kind of our heartbeat. And so did a Kickstarter, went really well, got investors, went really well. The first year, we're gaining customers, momentum is moving really strongly, just like we thought, just like we had planned. And then the second year hit, and we start running out of cash, and customers aren't coming as quick as they were, and we start looking at the struggle of how is this going to work, and we say, okay, we'll take a little bit less money than we thought, right? Just a little bit. Like we give up cable. And
It's a big sacrifice.
Big
Guys,
sacrifice.
But don't worry, there's Netflix, there's Hulu, there's everything else.
Right. And so then, okay, we'll take 30% less there. And then that next 30% less comes. And then you're looking at, wait a minute, if we're doing this to make money, there are easier ways, there are better ways. And yet something changed in us through this time of where we were and the plan we were on and all of that, to where all of a sudden things weren't about profit and loss anymore. Things weren't about career trajectory or whatever the next big initiative or whatever in our life was. It became about faithfulness. And so this thing about, if this is about business, let's get out. Let's get out now. We can find other ways to do business, but we feel called. And there are people in our office every day that we're getting to have these heart conversations with that are things more than, how's your dog that just died or whatever, but it's like, what is it like to say it is well with your soul? Like, what is it like to know what it's like to have much, to know what it's like to have little, and be able to say, I choose a little anyway? Because to die is gain, or what is it? To die is
To live is Christ.
to live
and
is
die
Christ,
gain.
and to die is gain.
Yeah.
And that, to me, changed an outlook in us and in our marriage, and in the way we approached kind of our family as well.
I think we're a part of a culture on the north side of Indianapolis. We're a part of a culture in social media that kind of feeds that cycle, right? Like, if you start something and it doesn't go successful, there must have been something wrong with you.
Well, yeah, like God gives favor to things, and favor means momentum, and favor means growth, and favor means that it's attractive, and favor means impact. And I said last service that I think we can make impact an idol in the church, and we can think that the broader the impact, the better. And there are easier ways than what we're doing to have impact, and even that, like, you have to die to that. And if Jesus isn't the prize, if Jesus isn't actually the main thing, then you're doing it wrong. But the church culture and social media church culture likes to
and
celebrate
Hamilton County in
things.
general, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, for
We
sure.
like to celebrate things that are growing. Don't we
Yeah.
all want to be part of something
Right.
that's growing?
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, I think we feel important and valued and like we're part of the move of God. But the move of God in our life has been like faithfulness and slow and small and obedient and like not on the up and to the right, but like we're just hoping that it stays level. So,
Right.
Well, I mean, as I was listening to you guys talk on Thursday, it's like what you're describing is church planting. That's what I was thinking.
Yeah.
Like, oh, this is just basically church planting, because that's kind of it's you go here and then you go down, and then you come back up and you go down again, and it's if you allow the outward success to define your value, you're on this emotional roller coaster.
Yeah. And I think you're going against a culture that says that success means the up and to the right. And you have people that are well-meaning in your life that are saying like, oh, should you jump ship? Should you like change trajectory? And you kind of have to like listen to this still small voice and be obedient and be faithful. So.
That's good. As we wrap up, Mike, one thing you're learning in this, obviously you're not missing meals, you're not living in a third world country. So the adversity that I think you're experiencing, I think is actually good because we can all relate to it.
Yeah.
It's career adversity, right? It's this calling that you feel, it's this cause that you have in your heart, and it's not playing out as fast or as beautifully as you thought it would.
Yeah.
But God's still doing something in you.
Yeah, I mean, I think so. What I've learned is if I had to say, what is the aim of my life? And the question that I asked myself a few years ago isn't the same as what it is now. If the aim of my life is to experience the presence of the Lord, how do I experience that? And I think what I'm learning is dependence on the Father has something that I have experienced the presence of the Lord through, that has given a depth to my relationship with God that I'm not sure that I could have understood before. But when we're dependent on the Father, when we learn that intimacy comes through dependence, that's where I think I've grown a lot.
Haley, what about you?
Yeah, I think that I just always assumed that when you got a steady paycheck, like we deserved that, it came in, we had budgeted our life to that because that's what good Hamilton County people do. You live within your means, you're Dave Ramsey, all of these things. But for me, it was coming to the end of myself. And I'm a problem solver. I'm like the one that first thing, like if things look like the dollars and cents aren't going to add up, my temptation every month is to be like, let's hustle something up. Like, we can do that. This is just like a little shortfall. We can meet this. And to be obedient in my life has meant that I have to step back and say, like, nope, not going to rely on my own strength, not going to rely on the solutions that I can come up with. I'm going to rely that the Lord is going to come through for us. And that's that dependence on the Father. And my own relationship with my actual father is not like that. And so I had to doubly learn that. But it's been like faith changing. And I've been a believer for 15 years. And that's something I've only understood in the last 2. And that's just like bonkers that we can live a Christian life for a long time and not get that.
That's good. Can you guys help me thank them just for sharing part of their story today? Good stuff. Well, what they're talking about and what they're actually living really kind of fits really well into what I want to talk about today, because I want to talk to you guys today about this idea that we can actually embrace adversity in our life. We can actually embrace the heartache, the hardships, the difficult times. And that is probably more how we can relate to God than through success and through really flourishing sometimes. Sometimes it's success that can detract us from actually experiencing God's presence the most. And so I want to look at this passage in Joshua chapter 1, and just before we dive into it, I want to kind of set it up for you. The nation of Israel is about 2 million people this time of history. They've been captive in the nation of Egypt for 430 years. Okay, so God hears their cries. He sees their pain. He decides to raise up this guy named Moses who's going to lead them out of Egypt. All right, so he comes to Moses. Moses goes to Pharaoh. Moses says, let my people go. Pharaoh decides to let the nation of Israel be released. They take off. Pharaoh changes his mind and pursues them with his army. They get to the Red Sea, right? And they start freaking out. They're like, Moses, why'd you bring us out here to die? We could have at least been, even though we were slaves, we could at least been alive in Egypt, because that's what our tendency is. When things get hard, we want to go back. Even if we're in slavery, we still want to go back. And God shows up in a powerful way. Right? He parts the Red Sea. They all go across on dry ground. They get across the Red Sea, and not only does God come through with a miracle in that way, he starts leading them to this land that they've been promised for generations. They've been talking about the promised land. It came through Abraham. God said, I'm going to set aside this land for you to inherit and inhabit, and you're going to be my people, and I'm going to be your God. And so Moses starts leading the nation of Israel in that direction. And not only does God part the Red Sea, but then he does an amazing miracle. He gives them a cloud by day to follow, and he gives them a pillar of fire by night. So he gives them direction. They don't have any provision. They don't have any food. There's 2 million people. How are they ever going to find enough food for 2 million people? So God starts raining down food from heaven. All right? I don't know if you've ever experienced that or not, but that's pretty amazing. All right? And they get sideways. They get all mad because it's just manna. All right? And it's just it's not this buffet. It's just the same thing over and over again. So they start, complaining to God. And so God says, you know what? I'm going to give you the promised land. Here's what's going to happen. I want you to send 12 spies to take a look at it, to scout it out. They're going to come back, and then I want you guys to go. I want you to conquer it with your army. These 12 guys go into the promised land. 10 come back, give a bad report. They're never going to be able to do it. 2 come back and say, you know what? God's been faithful. He parted the Red Sea. He gave us a cloud by day, a pillar of fire by night. He gave us manna from heaven. He can take this army out. They go with the majority. And that act of disobedience cost the nation of Israel 40 years of their life, because God said, you know what? No one who didn't believe that I was who I said I am is going to ever see the promised land, including Moses. And so we come to Joshua chapter 1. Moses has died, and Joshua has handed the baton of leadership. And this is what happens. They're at the Jordan River getting ready to go into the promised land. It says this in Joshua chapter 1, verses 1 through 9. After the death of Moses, the Lord's servant, the Lord spoke to Joshua, son of Nun, Moses' assistant. He said, Moses, my servant, is dead. Therefore, the time has come for you to lead these people, the Israelites, across the Jordan River into the land I am giving them. I promise you what I promised Moses. Wherever you set your foot, you will be on land I've given you. From the Negev wilderness in the south to the Lebanon mountains in the north, from the Euphrates River in the east to the Mediterranean Sea in the west, including all the land of the Hittites. No one will be able to stand against you as long as you live. For I'll be with you as I was with Moses. I will not fail you or abandon you. Be strong and courageous, for you're the one who will lead these people to possess all the land I swore to their ancestors I would give them. Be strong and very courageous. Be careful to obey all the instructions Moses gave you. Do not deviate from them, turning either to the right or to the left. Then you'll be successful in everything that you do. Study this book of instruction continually. Meditate on it day and night so that you will be sure to obey everything written in it. Only then will you prosper and succeed in all that you do. This is my command. Be strong and courageous. Do not be afraid or discouraged, for the Lord your God is with you wherever you go. So what I want to do this morning is I want to take this passage of Scripture, I want to take kind of the story of discomfort and adversity that Haley and Mike talked about. I want to draw out just 4 principles quickly as it pertains to this story that you and I can leverage in our own life when we experience adversity. And the first is this: it's easy to equate pain avoidance with God's blessing. It's easy for us, especially for those of us who call ourselves Christians, for those of us who believe in God, for those of us who've walked with God for a while, it's easy for us to think that God's blessing equals problem-free. That if God is for us, then problems will not be against us. If God is for us, then our life is going to be easy, our life is going to be fruitful, our life is going to be blessed. And so when something happens, when a diagnosis comes, or when a job is lost, or when a divorce is pronounced, or when a relationship blows up, our first default is what? Why is God mad at me? Now, part of that is our culture. Part of that is how we grew up in church. We were conditioned to believe that God was mad at us and that he was just angry at us all the time and that if he was going to strike us down from heaven. That's part of us, of how we were conditioned, if you grew up in the kind of church culture that I grew up in, to believe about God. But our first default as followers of God is, I must have done something wrong to lose my job. I must have done something wrong to be struggling financially. I must have done something wrong to have this relationship blown up. And so often I think we do have a part to play in some of those things, right? Maybe we didn't perform as well as we needed to, or maybe we didn't handle our finances as well as we should have, or maybe we were a little dysfunctional in that relationship. But our default is, God is punishing me. And it's easy to equate problem-free with God's blessing. But look at Joshua chapter 1, verse 3 and 5. It says this: I promise you what I promised Moses. Wherever you set your foot, you'll be on land that I have given you. No one will be able to stand against you as long as you live, for I will be with you as I was with Moses. Now, what does God say? Yes, he's promising Joshua blessings, but more than that, the last sentence is the key. I will not fail you or abandon you. See, this isn't the first time that the nation of Israel has been at the Jordan River looking at the Promised Land. 40 years before this, they were in this exact same position. And I think so often we have to repeat history until we learn our lesson from it. There was a generation of people that did not believe that God was who he said he was and would do all that he said he would do. And so God waited for the next generation to come. And they had to learn the lesson that their parents were unable to learn. So now in this moment, the only thing that's keeping them from the Promised Land is the Jordan River. And this is what happens in chapter 3. This is God's instructions to Joshua. He says, tell the priests who carry the Ark of the Covenant, when you reach the edge of the Jordan waters, go stand in the river. So they have to participate in what God is getting ready to do. It's not going to be easy. It's not going to be a staff in the ground and watch the waters part. See, there's some miracles in your life that you're going to be able to stand and observe. But then there's some acts of God in your life that you're only going to be able to experience as you participate in them. As you step into the water, as you go into the water, as we're going to see in just a few minutes at flood stage. As you step in, only then will God perform the miracle. And maybe some of you today, you come in and you're in this place spiritually where you just feel numb. Right? You just feel plateaued. You just feel stagnant and flatlined. And God is more distant in your life than he ever has been. And here's what's crazy. You go to church. You sing the songs. You raise your hands. Right? You volunteer. You're doing all of the religious things. But maybe you're looking at trials and heartache and disappointment in the opposite way that you should. Maybe the pain that you're experiencing in your life isn't something that you're supposed to get through. Maybe it's something that you're supposed to learn from. Maybe the greatest catalyst to your faith isn't the comfort that you desire, but it's the adversity that you're avoiding in your life. You got to say, hey, I can leverage that. I can stop the water in midstream, but you have to be willing to walk in. You have to be willing to take the first step. I want you to think about your relationship with God. Think about the history of your relationship with God. Have you experienced God's presence and power most in your life during times of success? My guess is probably not. My guess is you've probably experienced God's presence the closest, the most intimate, during times of adversity, during disappointment, during times where you had to step back and go, whoa, what is going on here? It's in those moments that God shows up the most. Second principle is God doesn't call us to be safe, he commands us to be courageous. Joshua 1:9, very famous verse, we like to quote it, right? It says, "This is my command, be strong and courageous, don't be afraid or discouraged, for the Lord your God is with you wherever you go." 10 times in Joshua chapter 1, God commands Joshua to be strong and courageous. Anytime something is repeated in Scripture, it's for emphasis. I think 3 times, if I have to tell my kids something 3 times, by the 4th time, I'm like over it, right? God says to this young leader 10 times, be strong and courageous. Why so many times? I think it's because fear and uncertainty will always try to rob you of the story that God is writing with your life. And so God preempts the fear. God preempts the uncertainty. Before Joshua is even at the river, God says to him, hey, be strong, be courageous. Joshua hasn't even felt fearful yet. God is going before him and saying, hey, I'm going to be proactive here. I'm going to speak courage into your life. I'm going to speak confidence into your heart before you even get to the water. One of the things that God never says in Joshua, the whole book of Joshua, is be safe. He never says, be safe and careful. Be safe and protected. God never says that. How many of you have ever heard the statement, the safest place to be is at the center of God's will? Anybody ever heard that? Some of you? Okay. That's the biggest load of bull I've ever heard in my life. Think about Jesus. How safe was that for him? All right. I think he was in the center of God's will, crucified. All right. Didn't work out well. Think about Paul. Think about Peter. Think about any disciple other than Judas. Right? What did they do? They lost their lives for their faith. Wasn't exactly safe in the middle of God's will. Think about anybody in the Old Testament that had any significant role in the plan and story of God. Did they have it easy? No, they had it difficult. Right? Noah had to build an ark. Right? Abraham had to sacrifice his son, although he didn't sacrifice him, he had to be willing to. I think we have conditioned ourselves in our American culture to think the safest place to be is in the center of God's will. Actually, it's the most dangerous. It might be the most peaceful, but it's not the safest. God doesn't ask you to be safe. He tells you to be courageous. And courage is not the absence of fear. It's the presence of God in the midst of your fear. That's what courage is. God's saying, hey, be strong, be courageous. You know why? Because you're going to be afraid. Be strong, be courageous because you're going to be fearful. Be strong, be courageous because it's going to be uncertain. Be strong, be courageous, but I'm going with you. The Lord is with you wherever you go. God never tells us or calls us to be safe, but he always commands us to be courageous. And your courage in the midst of uncertainty, your courage in the midst of fear could determine the level and the depth that you experience God's presence. See, God's promise for you is that he will be with you. He'll never abandon you. He'll never leave you. But if we're always trying to be safe, I think we cheat ourselves out of the fullness of God's presence. I think God has so much more he wants to give us, but it's our timidity, it's our reluctance, it's our lack of stepping into the water that prevents him from stopping it. Right? God can't perform a miracle we're not willing to participate in. Number 3, nothing brings us closer to God than coming to the end of ourselves. That's what Haley was talking about. Nothing will bring you closer to God than not having any answers that you can provide. Look at Joshua chapter 3, verses 12 and 13. This is God talking to Joshua. He says, now choose 12 men from the tribes of Israel, one from each tribe. The priest will carry the ark of the Lord of all the earth. As soon as their feet touch the water, the flow of water will be cut off upstream and will stand up like a heap in a wall, stand up like a wall. Now the Jordan is at flood stage all during harvest. Now I want you to think about this from the nation of Israel's perspective. It's been 40 years for them. 40 years of walking, 40 years of wondering, 40 years of frustration, 40 years of disappointment, 40 years of watching their relatives die, waiting for God to finally bless them. 40 long years. They finally get to the edge of the Jordan River, which all that's preventing them from experiencing the promised land is this river, walking across it to inhabit this place that they've been talking about and dreaming about and hearing stories about for generations. And God, in his sovereignty, brings them to the Jordan River in flood stage. Now, if you go to the Jordan River at any other time other than harvest season, other than the time that they're there, it's like a little stream. You can walk across it without a boat. But at this time, it's at flood stage. It's a roaring river. No one is able to make it across. And Joshua had to be thinking, really, God? Like, I was the faithful one. I was one of the two that came back and gave you a good report. I was one of the two that said you could do it. I've led these people like you said to lead them, and this is how you're going to repay me? You're going to bring us to the Jordan River at flood stage? How are we going to get across? I think it's so easy for us to try to solve problems on our own. God brought them to flood stage so that they would have no other choice other than to depend on him. And for some of you, you know all about flood stage. I've gotten your emails. I've prayed with you in hospitals. I've talked to you after services. We have people in our church right now who, one gentleman just had brain surgery, just had a tumor removed from his brain, or from his head. We have families who are experiencing all kinds of issues with their kids. We have families who are experiencing all kinds of marriage issues. We have people who are struggling with their employment. Just in our community, we know all about flood stage. For some of you, maybe it's a relationship that is slowly dying. Maybe it's finances that are being squeezed right now. Maybe it's a marriage that is just on its last little thread. Maybe it's a job that you don't have anymore. And you're looking at your life going, really, God? Like flood stage, that's the best you have for me? And I think for many of us, we think that flood stage is a bad thing, and God's saying, hey, I will leverage every aspect of your life and all of your circumstances to grow your dependence on me. See, God will overwhelm any solution that you might be able to come up with so that you can turn to him to find hope and to find the strength that only he can give. And I think for many of us, we don't like that answer. We don't like being dependent on God. We think that we can control ourselves. We think we can control our situation. We live with this illusion of control, and God is saying, hey, if you'll surrender, I'll stop the waves. I'll stop the water. I'll stack it up in a heap, and you'll be able to cross over. But you're not in control. It comes through surrender. Finally, the Jordan River is crossed or not crossed long before flood stage. Now, that statement by itself doesn't make sense, but in the context of this story, I think it's a beautiful thing that your life and your faith, it's not linear. It's this messy, circular thing that God is using. It's not just this 5 happy hops to a growing relationship with God. If it were that easy, we would all be closer to God. Right? It's this messy thing, it's this organic thing that we have to learn and we have to grow, and then we have to fall down and we have to get back up, and we have to fail, and then we have to be redeemed, and we have to succeed, and then we have to learn from our success. It's this process that God takes us through. And I want to show you what I think is the secret sauce of Joshua's leadership here. And if you want to leverage the adversity that you face in your life, I think this is huge. And to see it, we have to go back to Exodus chapter 33. And this is 45 years before Joshua takes leadership of the nation of Israel. It's a very powerful statement. Look what it says in Exodus chapter 33. It says, now Moses used to take a tent and pitch it outside the camp some distance away, calling it the tent of meeting. Anyone inquiring of the Lord would go to that tent of meeting outside the camp. So this is like a church service, okay? So they would have this tent of meeting that was set up outside the camp, but before they had a synagogue, they're portable, right? They're like the first portable church, all right? They're wandering for 40 years just setting up a tent, okay? That's their church. They didn't even have lights. Okay, so the Lord would speak to Moses face to face as one speaks to a friend, which I think is such a powerful statement. Then check this out. This is how it ends. Then Moses would return to the camp, but his young aide Joshua, son of Nun, did not leave the tent. So God comes to this tent to meet with Moses. Moses leaves the tent to go take care of the business of leading the nation of Israel, but Joshua stays in the tent. See, Joshua had a 45-year history when he was handed the baton of leadership of the nation of Israel of talking to God. He had been in the tent with God his entire life. And so he earned trust with God, and God earned trust with him. And so when he saw the river at flood stage, it did not even faze him. He didn't complain. He didn't question it. You know what he said? He said, hey, set yourselves apart today because you're getting ready to see God do something amazing. And he hadn't even been told what was going to happen yet. He just knew that God was going to show up. He knew that God was not going to bring them to the edge of the river and not provide for them a way to get across. And this isn't like, okay, if you want to deal with adversity, just know God more. That's not what I'm saying. This isn't a formula. This is a relationship. This is you and I diving into an intimate relationship with God, surrendering our pride, surrendering our circumstances, surrendering our control to God and saying, okay, God, I don't think that you know what's better for my life than I do, but I'm gonna start there. And I'm gonna give you a shot. I'm gonna give you a chance. I'm gonna trust you. And you're going to meet with God, and you're going to meet with God, and you're going to wrestle with God, and you're going to talk with God, and you're going to scream at God, and you're going to be honest with God, and then God is going to show up. And then he's going to show up again. And then you're going to talk with him some more, and you're going to question him some more, and you're going to wrestle with him some more, and he's going to show up again. Joshua had 45 years of that in his back pocket to pull out in this circumstance and say, okay, you know what? Long before we ever got here, I'd already met with God. Long before the river was at flood stage, God's already taken care of this. He didn't know how it was going to play out. He just knew it would play out. Long before you ever face adversity, my advice to you is go face to face with God. And then you will know that adversity is a sign that God is using your circumstance to develop your character. And I know that's hard to understand because some of you are in really difficult circumstances. Some of you are in really painful circumstances. Some of you are in circumstances that you haven't chosen, that have been chosen for you. Can I just say that God is not bound by other people's choices or sins, and he's not bound by your circumstances. He longs to leverage everything for your good and his glory. And it might not be in the time frame that you are comfortable with or that I'm comfortable with. It took 40 years for the nation of Israel. But he came through. And he's come through generation after generation after generation. He's going to come through for you in your diagnosis. He's going to come through for you in your relationship. He's going to come through for you in your finances. He's going to come through. You know why? Because that's what he does. His character. And if you'll embrace the adversity that you're in right now and realize that God is bigger than your circumstances, God will show up in your circumstances. Let's pray together.